Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of The Chocolate Life Live. My name is Clay Gordon. I'm your host today, and I'm also the creator and the moderator of TheChocolateLife.com. Today's topic is the June, all the chocolate news that's fit to eat, as well as the AMA or Ask Me Anything. So wherever you're checking in from today, go into the comments, and if you have a question, put it into the comments. I will try to get the questions asked and answered over the course. Or if you're just listening, go into the comments and let me know where in the world you're checking in from today. Where in the world I like to know, because I like to know the reach and where things are, and if I have a connection to a place that where there is somebody listening, I can make that connection during the course of the hour. I want to just jump into it and get started because I think that's a good way to go. I'm playing with a new format today, a new way of showing me and showing the text of what I'm showing, the screen share. And so let me know in the comments if you think this is a good way to present the information. Right. But with that, what I want to do is I want to say um, um, here we have the homepage of thechocolatelife.com right now. You can go to the homepage. You can see what it is that we're doing for every single one of the episodes of The Chocolate Life. I produce an individual post. And this individual post gives the background, what it is that I'm going to be doing over the course of the live stream. If there are any guests, those guests will be mentioned. And then if there are any resources which I want you to look at, or which I think you would be useful to you to look at before the live stream started, or anything that is mentioned during the live stream, I will put it in here as well. So with all that said, um, let's get started. I think it's a good idea today. It's a beautiful day here in Prescott, Arizona. I'm really enjoying the weather here. But what I want to do is I want to start off with what I think is some of the most important news that landed in the last couple of weeks. It's not specifically cocoa and chocolate related, but it will have a huge implication on the worlds of cocoa and chocolate. And that is that the European Parliament has gone and voted to require that companies introduce climate transition plans. Now, this is going in the short term, so in the next couple of years, as the transition to this regulation happens. This is only going to be affecting large multinational companies with that have headquarters somewhere in the European Union, right? So these are the companies that should have been were on notice, have been on notice for the last couple of years that these things are coming, and now the day is here. So it's really, really important again for the bigger companies, and where if you're a craft chocolate maker or a small chocolate maker, where it could have an impact going forward is if you're buying equipment from a large company that's headquartered in the European Union, or if you are buying cocoa beans from a company that primarily works out of the European Union or has a big operation there. These are things that are going to be required of them by the European Parliament and the government. And so these are going to affect these companies' costs of doing business. But it should also be information that you could come to rely upon. You can go and look and see their transition plans and find out the information that you need to know so that what you can do is you can talk reliably to your customers. So just an important thing. So if you're a small company, so for example, if you're a small chocolate maker and you don't sell chocolate into the European Union, there's probably not going to be any direct impact on you in the short term, um, uh, or maybe ever really. Although there are some indications that the SEC here in the United States is going to be requiring or is considering requiring similar ESG regulations of listed companies on the stock market in the United States. So there could be some things going forward that you do have to pay attention to, but this is going to increase the cost of doing business. Number one, not a bad thing, but it's important to know what your requirements are if you are doing business in the European Union. If you're a big company, the implications are very short term, but if you're a small company, it could take 5, 6, 7 years or longer before you as a company need to be aware of these things in terms of how it affects your business and the kind of business reporting that you need to do. So importantly, it says here one of the most significant changes adopted is in the EU position compared to the initial proposal is the requirement by companies covered by the directive to implement climate transition plans aligned with the Paris Climate Accord. To limit global warming by 1.5 degrees centigrade, companies will be required to perform due diligence on climate impact also aligned with the Paris climate goals. Right? And then in addition to requiring climate transition plans, the rules will also require companies with more than 1,000 employees to tie performance on the plan's targets to directors' variable compensation. I think this is a real intriguing development, right? That they are going to hold accountable financially anyway, and to some extent, the compensation of directors of the companies to their ability to meet their obligations under these regulations. I think it's a really good idea because for too long, the CEOs of these companies and other senior executives of these companies have been compensated irrespective of their stated obligations, for example, as a member of the World Cocoa Foundation, to be able to limit their contribution to climate change, deforestation, and things like that in cocoa. So I think this is a really interesting idea, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it plays out in the future. Now, not related to that, but in the world of cocoa and chocolate, is this. We had the live stream on Friday was about innovation. So the innovation to the day on this website called Greenwashing is that chocolate brand Tony's Chocolate Only. Anybody who's followed me know that I'm not a fan of Tony's Chocolate Only, either of their chocolate, which is industrial berry calabaut chocolate, but that the Tony's is not very open about disclosing its relationship to the general public with berry calabaut, and whether or not the fact that even though their cocoa supply chain may be independent of berry calabaut still has a lot of child labor and other issues in its own supply chains. And does Tony's Chocolate Only, are they tainted because of the connection to berry calabaut? My contention is that they are. And so I'm not a fan of the Tony Chocolate Only's brand because I think that they're saying one thing and they're doing another. And this is an interesting question. I mean, I would be happy to go through and do another deep dive into the Tony's, the most recent annual report. Let me know if that's something that you'd like to do. Go into the comments. Let me know. And if you have a general question about anything, this is an AMA after all, put it into the comments and I will get it answered. So why is this an innovation? It's not an innovation, all right? What is mildly interesting about what's Tony's has done here is that they've gone and written essentially a series of covenants into their articles of incorporation, which make it much more difficult for investors or if anybody to purchase the company to be able to enable them to change the direction and mission of the company, right? Which could be done for it's one of the reasons why B Corp certification was created here in the United States. You can create in your articles of incorporation, you can put covenants, you can put clauses which say you can't do X and you can't do Y and you can't do Z. It also says that the board of directors and the senior executives of the company don't have to consider maximizing return on investment to maximizing return on investment to investors. They don't have to consider it to be the only thing. I mean, they do need to consider return on investment, but they are able to make investments which which would raise their cost of doing business, but which might be, for example, directly associated with combating the effects on climate change that they're directly involved in, or deciding to pay a lot more for cocoa beans than what the market says they should be paying. Any one of those little things, right? You can use B Corp in the United States and globally to write those kinds of covenants into the articles of incorporation of the company. But in this case, what they've particularly done is they've created something called Mission Lock. Good branding. I mean, Tony's is nothing if not a good branding company. The Mission Lock operates by bestowing a golden share to independent mission guardians. Well, so what they're doing is they're saying here, even the most virtuous, they're claiming to be well, at least this newsletter is saying they are virtuous. Purpose-driven company can see its core values overshadowed as the business evolves when it raises capital or changes hands, right? And so what Tony's is doing is legally trying to protect what their mission is. I actually see this, and if people have followed me on previous episodes where I've talked about deconstructing annual reports and things like that, I think this is a sign of Tony's getting ready to go public. They are concerned that if they do go public, that they will be forced under the terms of being a public company to consider other factors which may dilute what they consider to be the core tenets of the business. And so this is a way of making sure that doesn't happen. Again, I personally believe that this is another sign that what is happening here is that Tony's is getting ready to go public. It has a couple of huge private investors. They've put a lot of money into the company in the last couple of years. The company has grown. It now has more than 100 million in sales globally, although the vast majority of its income, I think around 40% of its sales, are in one country, the Netherlands, a very tiny country. It's going to require significant investment to grow market share in markets like the United States to gain anything like the penetration that they have in the Netherlands, for example. And so this is just another sign, I think, of that. Now, if you're a big fan of Tony's, I would start paying attention, maybe go taking a look at the Mission Lock program, decide if you want to be one of those guardians. I think of it as sort of like NFT trading cards, or fiat money that is being issued. This, to some extent, sounds like a little grift to me. I would need to know more. I will reach out to Tony's, and they can tell me, and perhaps they'll respond to me with with uh, with an answer. In which case, I will get back to everyone here on the Chocolate Life and the Chocolate Life Live to let you know what it is that I have heard. And if you have an opinion on this, put it in the comments. Go there, let me know what you think. Do you like Tony's Chocolate Only as a brand? What do you think of the mission? What do you think of the connection between Tony's and Barry Callebaut? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? If you've read any of their annual reports, what you think about the annual reports, just go into the comments. Whether you're watching on YouTube or LinkedIn and Facebook, I'll see them and I'll be able to respond to them. But again, is this an innovation? I'm not entirely certain. Is it a meaningful innovation? That I'm pretty confident it's not a meaningful innovation. Although from a legal perspective, perhaps it is. They found a way to use the laws in the EU in order to be able to do this in a way that nobody ever thought of before. But when it comes to actually, delivering real results on the ground, I don't know how valuable it is. And what I want to do is I want to judge them by the actual results that they're delivering. Very difficult thing to do when you try to deconstruct their annual report. Keeping in a similar kind of vein, so deconstructing what it is that we're being told as opposed to what it is that's actually happening on the ground. I ran across this story on Reuters. The headline is, "Rich nations say they're spending billions to fight climate change, and some of the money is going to strange places." The reason why it's here is because it mentions cocoa or chocolate somewhere in the article. And what we do is we find that the nation of Italy, as part of its pledge of $100 billion a year to help reduce the effects of global warming, right? Italy is helping a retailer open chocolate and gelato stores across Asia. Um, so I'm not entirely sure because they haven't talked about it specifically here, and it's something that I need to go and do the research on. I don't know which retailer is opening gelato stores and chocolate stores across Asia, and I don't know how the mission of those stores is connected to reducing climate change or having an effect on CO2 emissions, global greenhouse gas emissions, overall carbon footprint, and things like that. But this is where I think we need to be very, very careful. It's one of the places I think where we need to be very, very careful, as I've talked to in the past, as I've talked about in the past. There is a lot of greenwashing that goes on in the industry. People are saying one thing, they're equivocating, they're using words like can and may, and they are using statistics in a way that is disingenuous, I think. So they're cherry picking among other things, what they're telling us about what they're actually achieving. And then there's this, when I think about a country like Italy or a country like the United States, let's just not me talk about Italy here. When I think about investing to fight climate change, the idea of investing in a chain of gelato stores throughout Asia, or chocolate and gelato stores about Asia, is not where I think about investing that money. I think about investing it closer to the source. So I'd want to be doing things on the farm. I'd want to be doing things in the factory to reduce emissions, to reduce carbon footprint. For example, quite some time ago, I did an article and a live stream on estimating waste in the cocoa supply chain. And what we do is we find that at least 20% of anything that goes in a container, and it could be as high as 35 or 40% of what goes into a container, is waste, right? So obviously shells is one thing we need to consider, but then we also have the bags, whether jute or polypropylene. Each of them have their own waste streams, which are part of their making. We have the pallets, which go into them. We have the dressing, so the usually some absorbent paper, which lines the inside of the container. Then we also have moisture absorptive chemicals, which are put in the container. So there's a lot of waste that goes on. So if we could, in fact, invest in better facilities for transforming beans in producing countries and then not shipping waste, that would be an amazing improvement in terms of reduction of all the collateral upstream and downstream waste associated with shipping cocoa around the world. And that's where perhaps I would see investing in cocoa and chocolate. I don't necessarily see it there. But this is why we need to not take these kinds of proclamations at face value. We need to go and take a look behind it and look to see who the sources are, what their backgrounds are, what they're talking about, and all that other kind of stuff. So this, I think, is a tale that should concern everyone who is concerned about their taxpayer dollars or the money that they're paying, perhaps directly or indirectly, for climate-related activities, and where it's going and what's actually going on. And the final bit of news that I want to talk about in this segment is somehow related. Not somehow related. It is related to, right, what it is that Tony's Chocolonely is doing, and what it is that these nations that are in fact consuming countries, not producing companies, that are doing. And this is an article that talks about the hubris, right, I think, that is underlying most international aid programs, which is one of the reasons why most of them tend to fail in the long run. Right. So we're going to look at this, and we have a website in Switzerland. It's called Swissinfo. right? And there's a headline on it, right? Which is Swiss perspectives. That's really important here, Swiss perspectives, right? And the headline is 5 things African can do to make the most of its cocoa, right? So why Switzerland, right? Because 2 years ago, it was made very, very public that the Ghanaian government issued an ultimatum to the Swiss government. Basically, we're not going to export any more cocoa beans to Switzerland. And that got a lot of interest. People thought, yay, Ghana's doing these things politically and for other reasons. It was more performative, I think, than there was going to be any actual impact in it. But let's go again, to be a better consumer of this information. You might go, ooh, this is interesting. What are 5 things? Africa. So all of Africa, right? Right. Not just the countries in the cocoa belt and not just cocoa producing countries in Africa, but all of Africa. That conflation is a little problematic for me. I think yeah. So we're going to go down here, and first thing we're going to do is we're going to find that the author of the article, let me make it a little bigger here, is a guy by the name of Anand Chandrasekhar, right? My guess is from looking at this, he's Swiss Info's India specialist. So he's not an Africa specialist, he's an India specialist. And I'm going to guess that he is located in Switzerland. He knows a thing or two about Swiss watchmaking. He's also about Bollywood filmmaking. I have no idea what his expertise is in soft goods and agricultural commodities. We know that he likes the French-speaking parts of Switzerland as opposed to the German-speaking part of Switzerland. But let's go through and look at this. So let's find out, because they mentioned there are 5 things, but let's find out who they're talking to. So the first person they say is, what is one of the things that Africa can do? They could regulate supply. Well, I suppose they could. Could they create an informal cartel or a former cartel, sort of like OPEC, and sit down and collaborate on exactly what they're going to release and make available from what countries and control the price. Right now, price is more controlled on the commodities markets, especially New York and London. But what this person is saying is that they can regulate supply. That only makes sense, in my opinion, if what happens is a part of regulating supply, what they're doing is they do it ensuring that the dollars associated with the price paid make it more reliably back down to the farmer. And there's nothing here that ever says, all right, that anything here is about assisting the farmer, right? So the person who's talking about this, a gentleman by the name of Christian Robin, is the executive director of the Swiss platform for sustainable cocoa. So he's in Switzerland. He is Swiss. These are, after all, Swiss perspectives, and they're talking. And here are, if I can, white people in producing countries, or in consuming countries, excuse me, white people in consuming countries telling people in producing countries what they should be doing, right? And yeah, no, maybe what it would do, a key problem is that Africa grows more cocoa than the market can absorb. I don't necessarily know that that's true. Africa grows 80 to 90, well, 4 countries grow 80%. Overall, they grow a little more than 90% of the cocoa in the world. Is that 90% over 100% of global demand? I don't know that it is. So, okay, we don't have any indication that about this oversupply right now. As a matter of fact, cocoa is at a relatively high price on the commodities markets. So anyway, so here's the idea. So again, we have white people in consuming countries telling people in producing countries, you need to do a better job of regulating it, because if you put too much cocoa on the market, it hurts us, right? So, and I'm not a big fan of that market. And this is Christian Robin. So he's the exec director of the Swiss platform for sustainable cocoa. He also recommends that West African farmers diversify their farms and grow other crops. Many of them are already subsistent farmers, but hey, my my recommendation to you, Robin, is you go figure out a way to provide all of the dollar resources that are necessary to make this happen. Don't just stand there or sit there from your office in Zurich or Geneva or wherever you are in Switzerland and tell people, recommend that they do these things. Find the money, make it happen, right? Don't just sit back there. It's, right? So I got a problem with that. Another thing that needs to be done, right, is again, here is a person who's the business development manager at Max Avelar, one of the perhaps oldest fair trade in cocoa. So I know that Dagoba in 2001 was using Max Avelar fair trade certified cocoa in their products way back then, right? And so um, he's also saying the same thing. Unfortunately, there's too much volume of certified cocoa compared to what we can sell in the market. Hey, Max Avelar and everybody who's involved in fair trade, that's your problem. All right, sorry, there was a glitch. I'm back. Um, and hopefully you get the feeling that you understand how um, passionate I am about this, right? So, and my problem with fair trade in general is that they require cooperatives to pay for the privilege of being certified and then don't accept the economic risk, right? Oh, we've done a job of growing more supply than there is demand. Hey guys, hey Max Avelar, hey FLO Fair Trade, hey everybody who's involved in the fair trade movement, you guys need to do a better job of figuring out how to sell it, right? It's not, you don't go back to these farmers and say, whoa, put on the brakes and don't produce as much certified cocoa. That doesn't work. That's not the way the system should work. So I believe this is a completely bankrupt argument. Again, it's a Swiss perspective. Ooh, it's hurting our business. So you change your business. I don't understand why that's the case. Um, so the existing caretaker landover system has made the sector dysfunctional, right? Says a Swiss cocoa farmer, so somebody from Switzerland, maybe with Ghanaian background, who purchased a 30 acre, so what's that, about 11 hectares, 12 hectares in 2014. Um, so this is an argument that to some extent, I sympathize with, although I'm not sympathetic with this expression of it. So, what we have right now is a very, very limited set of organizational structures which exist in the world of cocoa farming. So, I can be an independent smallholder farmer, right? And who is not a member of a cooperative, right? And I can be responsible for my farm, and I can try to either use all the cocoa or sell the cocoa from my farm to an intermediary, right? And that's one form of organizational structure. The next step up is a cooperative. Now, most cooperatives that want to have any form of certification are fairly large, a couple hundred members to perhaps a couple thousand members. And um, and then we have estate holder farmers. And the challenge becomes, how do we enable? I think one of the challenges is, how do we enable the creation? I mean, so the legal infrastructure to allow smaller groups of people, smaller groups of farmers, to be able to federate in new kinds of ways. Well, when we did the uh, AVPA live stream last week, we did hear from a small cooperative, Michica, down near Cusco in Peru, which is a small association of about 30 farmers. And to the extent that this small association is able to engage in economic activity for its members that benefits all of its members at this scale, I think is a really, really good thing. The government of Peru is one of the few that seems to be facilitating this kind of organization, but it needs to be much more widespread. And around the notion of the minimum size should be, I need to get enough in my opinion, I need to get enough farmers together so that collectively they can produce at least one 40-foot container of cocoa, 25 metric tons. Should be about the smallest, right? Because if I'm a buyer, an international buyer, I don't want to buy a metric ton from here and 3 metric tons from there and 5 metric tons from there. I want to go buy a container from a single source, right? And so what we need to do is we need to change the notion of, well, we need to expand the number of organizational structures, especially at the smaller end, to enable collaboration. And at the same time, what we need to also do is go work on issues of land tenure. This is less of an issue in some countries in Africa, but it is a huge issue throughout the Americas. Often, who actually owns the land that a farmer is working on is unclear. And so, I mean, I had a specific example of this back in Panama in 2010, where I was working with a group that wanted to purchase a cocoa farm because they wanted to use the proceeds from the farm to be able to fund other things this non-governmental organization was doing. But in the end, we could not recommend moving forward because the people who were representing the farm for sale could not provide the documents that they actually owned the land. What this did is it left the new buyers in the position that somebody could come along with a document from some previous government, perhaps a pre-independence of Panama government, that said that they owned the land and that all of the dollars and all of the labor that was associated with investing in improving the farm could just be taken away. Just nope, you're not the owner. These guys are the owner, and they now own everything you've done. So land tenure is really, really important there. Pointing out the land holdings are too small, on average 2 hectares in Ghana. That's about right. And prices are too low for anyone to make a living wage. And so this is a challenge. Why are we focusing on keeping the smallholder farmer on the smallholder farm? If it is completely untenable in most cases for the smallholder farmer to make a living on the smallholder farm, then figuring out organizational structures which allow groups of farmers to federate to achieve specific objectives. Perhaps as a group, they may be more eligible for capital. They can help each other out, so it solves labor problems and maybe helps reduce illegal labor. All sorts of interesting things can happen as a result of this idea, is that we need to rethink the caretaker land owner smallholder farmer system which exists in most of the world. Now, it's probably the hardest thing of all of the potential changes that we could make because it talks about changing the culture of cocoa in these countries, which stretches back in many cases 100 years or more. But this is, I think, one of the things that's interesting, and it may be nuanced because here is somebody from Switzerland who may be actually on the farm down in Ghana on a regular basis and is talking from a very, very different, right, very, very different personal experience than the previous gentlemen were. So West Africa produces more cocoa than is needed. Not certain that that's the case. Yields on the farms are under threat due to disease and less productive older trees. Right. So if that's the case, we don't actually need to, because if West Africa is overproducing and there are lots of older trees, why don't we just reduce the amount of land, right, that's being used to farm cocoa, and rather than planting new areas, go in and replace existing varieties with more existing varieties and older trees with younger trees. Good idea, right? So $230 million, right, to rehabilitate some 160,000 hectares of unproductive cocoa plantations, right? One of the reasons why they're unproductive is a disease called cocoa swollen shoot virus, which has the potential to crater production in West Africa the way that Escobar bruja, witch's broom, and other diseases have done in the Americas. So, so this is something that I spoke about. I'm doing an article right now, or just finished an article for International Confectionery about meaningful innovation. And one of the things I mentioned in it is that rather than spending money in what I think of as like dubious unicorn startups for the stock market, develop a kit to detect cocoa swollen shoot virus in the field, right? And how do we do it at a way that's affordable? So yeah, should we be spending money to detect heavy metals? These are very, very expensive tests. Are there other tests that we can invest money in, which is going to help the farmer and bring it to a point where it can be done on a regular basis before it becomes a problem, right? And one of the things that Swiss Decode, this company, wants to do is bring the price down. Absolutely, I think that's a great, great idea. But we still have this problem. If still with older trees and lots of land that needs to be rehabilitated, we're overproducing, then there's something about the way the entire system is structured that systemically is wrong, right? And we need to figure out what that means rather than the status quo, because right now, big chocolate relies on the status quo in order to be able to achieve the profits that it does. Anyway, so here, know your customers. This is an interesting case because the gentleman here, Onion Schreiber, is the CEO of a new company called Koa, and one of the things they're doing is they're selling products that are made from the pulp and the juice, right? So they've done an innovation supply chain, which is they've done innovations in the supply chain to keep the cacao juice fresh. It remains to be seen whether or not there are mass market. There's a place in the mass market for these products. The juice products are not horribly successful at all in the United States. There are a couple of companies who've tried it. There are companies that have used the cocoa sugar to sweeten their chocolate. There are not very many good tasting versions of these chocolates together. Um, Good versions of these chocolate, excuse me. But what he's saying here, in addition to local production, right, pushing production down into producing countries, which is what he's talking about here, he advises, okay, so this is people who have money to invest in a marketing entity in the Europe or the United States to get really close to end consumers, right? And by end consumers, he's talking about the general public, not talking about the intermediate consumer who's taking these products and doing the transformation, right? And find new ways to add value to their cocoa. So it's not entirely clear exactly what it is that he's saying there, but here is right. Here is a graph here. It's talking about the share of revenue from the sale of a chocolate bar. For some reason, this is the price of a chocolate bar in France rather than in Switzerland. I'm not entirely sure why that is the case. But most importantly, and I want everybody to be aware of this, is that it shows the source, which is, among other places, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, and you can go and get the actual data, which is used to generate the charts. So you're actually going to be able to go, if you want to do the research, and find out how these graphs were generated. But one of the things that they're saying is that on average, a retailer is going to make somewhere around 35 to 38%, 37, 38% of the retail price of a bar. That farmers are going to be down in actually, this is much, around 7%, I think, of the price of bar. I'd actually need to go with the data rather than looking at the graph and the colors. But it turns out that, this notion of understanding what the consumers want, right? One of the reasons why people are looking at diversifying their focus away from just the seeds and just from brown, right, is that they want to find an upcycling story and to be able to provide additional income to farmers and to be able to find new markets for what is generally considered to be a waste product right now, which is what this is all about. I agree in general with all of those things, but what I would really like to hear is from I don't want to hear from the CEO of a Swiss-based company. What I want to do is I want to hear from the people who are involved in doing this on the ground in the producing countries, right? To make it relevant. And this is, again, I think also really, really important to attract youth. So right now, the average age of cocoa farmers around the world is fairly high. Younger generation is weighing its options and is saying, cocoa farming is not what it is that I want to do in the future. Maybe this is a problem that solves itself. Remember, I'm already in a well, the world is already in a position of oversupply from Africa. We already have a lot of land that is underproducing. Why don't we just abandon that land, right, and let it go back and let nature rehabilitate it on its own over the course of a little while, and then get to a position where we're no longer oversupplying and we need less labor. We could be more efficient about the way we collaborate, about the way we federate farming so that it becomes less of an individual responsibility and an individual activity. So these things are all related to each other. And if you're not actually involved intimately, if you haven't spent a lot of time in cocoa producing countries, that trying to pick up the threads, right, and figuring how they relate to each other, it's very, very important. So interesting article. I really, really do advise you go and take a look at this, but also read it in conjunction with the Reuters article, right? And then with also what it is that Tony is saying, and then again, what it is the European Parliament is doing, because I think that the combination of these things is really, really, really interesting to consider. And with that, I want to take a really short break, and because we're more than halfway through the program, and want to thank everybody who's watching today. You're watching the Chocolate Life Live. My name is Clay Gordon. I'm your host here, and I'm also the creator of TheChocolateLife.com. You can go take a look. Here is the homepage of The Chocolate Life right now. So there, for every single one of these live streams, I create a post, and I'm going to put the links to all of the resources that I mentioned in the post, so that you will be able to, you don't have to follow along and try to grab the URLs from the live stream. And then if you are a member of the Chocolate Life Live or the Chocolate Life, you will be able to go here and add your comments to this post. So if you add a comment to this post after the live stream is over, you can do it here on the Chocolate Life, or you can do it on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook, and I will respond to those comments. And then really, really quickly, just throw this little thing. So please like, comment, and share the video, and subscribe to the Chocolate Wire channel on YouTube. Grow the number of people who are watching and the influence. I really do appreciate giving it a thumbs up, going to the channel, and doing a subscribe. I would appreciate that. You can go directly to the channel on YouTube by clicking this link right here. Visit the Chocolate Wire channel on YouTube and then subscribing. We've got it there. All right. And then I also want to, while I'm here, do a quick thank to the sponsors of today's video, who are the members of the Chocolate Life. If you're not currently a member, please go. You can click on I'm logged in, so it says account. If you're not logged in, it will say join or sign in. And if you're not a member, please go sign in. There's always a free membership level. I appreciate any level of support that you can give to what it is that I am doing here. Great. And with that quick break, let's get back to things. So what I wanted to do on maybe a little less serious note, a little less newsy news note, is to say, number one, if you're interested in participating in the 2024 round of the Good Food Awards, entries opened yesterday. So you can go to the Good Food Awards website. I have linked directly to the awards page rather than to the homepage, and you can click the enter now. They're accepting entries through the 30th of June. it's a good exercise to go through, to find out how your number one is, does the organization consider what it is you're doing good given the criteria? For the chocolate and the confectionery categories, they're judged, by the way, they're judged separately. There's a chocolate category, there's a confectionery category. They're judged separately. And should you win an award, there's a reasonable amount of support that the organization gives to help get your product into distribution and to improve sales. So I think that right now in the United States, in terms of an awards program that might have the most direct, broad impact on potential retail sales and distribution, I think the Good Food Awards might be the best one currently in the United States. On a related kind of competition area, there is this note that came up today that the Davao in the Philippines is sending 3 entries into the upcoming round of the Cacao of Excellence Awards, which will actually, so they sent, all right, because they're already being done, and then the awards will be presented in Paris at the Salon du Chocolat at the end of October into the first week in November. I think that one of the things that the craft chocolate industry can be proudest of, right, is the fact that what it has done is it has focused on the ability of small farmers to be able to produce a very, very high quality cocoa, especially in countries that are not well known for producing, number one, not well known for producing cocoa, but not well known for producing high quality cocoa. So there are winners, for example, from Ghana and the Ivory Coast, and not many people think that any cocoa from Ghana and the Ivory Coast could be considered to be a fine flavor cocoa variety. Many don't know that the Philippines is a producing country, and it's a matter of fact, it's one of the first places where cocoa left from South America. I think Spanish Jesuits took it. I want to say before it made it to Fernando Po, or to Sao Tome and Principe. I mean, it's really, really old, but so it's got interesting ancient genetics. So it's great to know that the Cacao of Excellence Awards and the craft chocolate world as well can take pride in these kinds of producing countries being able to move to prominence on the world stage. So congratulations to these farmers and to all of the growers who are going to have had their cacao entered into, because they need to go to national competitions, and then there are regional competitions because there's only so many entries from different parts of the world. And so there's this extensive evaluation process, which goes even before the cocoa is sent to for evaluation for the awards themselves. It's just been, I think, a great opportunity for everyone involved. And again, congratulations to everybody who's in this year's competition. This next one's an interesting article. I found it on LinkedIn. It showed up in my feed. This is actually my page on LinkedIn. And it talks about the influence of wine ratings and critics on investment decisions, evaluating their impact on the fine wine market. And what's really interesting for me about this article is that there is no analog in the world of chocolate, right? There is no investment in chocolate. Even though there is a fine chocolate market, right? There's no trading. I can't buy a case of wine after Robert Parker gives it a 99 and then expect that 10 years later or 20 years later, it will be worth 5, 10, 20, 30 times more than what it is that I paid for it originally. There's nothing in the world of cocoa and chocolate which is like this at all. There are people who are trying to push the price up significantly. They're trying to push it into this gourmet high-end stratosphere. I personally think that many of the techniques used to do that are gimmicks. They have nothing really to do with the cocoa or the chocolate themselves. They have to do with the ancillary aspects of flavors and associations with other brands. But in this particular case, read this and go ask yourself, is there anything in the world of cocoa and chocolate, which is anything like, right, the leverages that the writer here, Maria Laura Ortiz Chiveta, is talking about in the world of cocoa and chocolate. I would be really, really interested to know if anybody sees anything like that. Um, so just a real quick, quick shout out to Mark at Blue Spruce in Kittredge, Colorado, who says, we appreciate the review of current chocolate news and perspective on it. Hey, Mark, thank you very much. I appreciate the shout out, vote of confidence, and the fact that you are a supporter of TheChocolateLife.com, a premium member, as a matter of fact, showing your financial support for what I do. So I thank you very much. As I say, the sponsors of all of these live streams are the members of TheChocolateLife.com. And I thank all of you for your support in being a member. All right, so having done that, go read this. Again, let me know, put it in the comments, either on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook, put in the comments in the post on The Chocolate Life, what you think about this. Is there anything that's talked about in this article that has any analog in the world of cocoa and chocolate? I would be really interested in knowing what it is that you think, or if I am completely out of line. So, right, how do you make milk chocolate? How do you make chocolate milk healthy? Right. So we've been talking about health and health benefits and all this kind of innovations in and around health and things like that. And so, how do we make chocolate milk healthy? I think is appropriate in the context of what it is that we've been talking about here on the channel. And basically, they're saying, make sure that you don't add too much sugar to it. That's the way you do it. You just make sure you don't add too much sugar to it. It's also been clinically shown that chocolate milk is actually one of the best post-workout recovery beverages for you. So how do you do this? You find a really, really good natural cocoa powder, right? You don't want to use an alkalized cocoa powder. Use a natural cocoa powder. Pour it into good milk, right? I have some local dairy that I can get here in the market, so I'm not worried about something where the cows are farmed in 2,000 miles away, and everything is very, very heavily processed and then shipped thousands of miles to where it is that I am. I got good local dairy that I can get to, and so make sure you're good local dairy. Make sure it's a high fat milk, so use whole milk rather than skim milk or non-fat milk, and again, use perhaps a non-refined sugar if you're going to use a sweetener. I suppose you could use a non-nutritive sweetener. Maybe you could use monk fruit. I don't like the taste of it. You might be able to use erythritol. I don't like the taste of it. There are other things that you might be able to buy, blends, little like 1-to-1 sugar blends. I've talked about this product called Supplant. If you could get your hands on it, it might be a good low calorie, low glycemic index, low glycemic load. But the general guidelines here appear to be use really good quality milk, use a good natural, not Dutch processed cocoa powder, and then use as little sweetener as you possibly can to make it palatable. So go there. Really, really, really good. So, and they talk specifically about unhealthy types to stay away from. So which types of chocolate milk are not healthy? So stay away from high fructose corn syrup. We try to do that in general. And then they're saying, if you're lactose intolerant, don't use milk, right? Use a non-dairy equivalent in order to be able to do that. But yeah, make it just before you put it in a bottle, a shaker bottle with one of the little shaker things in it. Take it to the gym with you, or out on a run, or have it in the refrigerator for when you get back to the run. Just shake it up just before you drink it. Do it ice cold, yum. And because of all the vitamins and minerals and other things that are in the cocoa, you've got yourself one of the healthiest post-workout recovery beverages that you can drink. And it's it does some rehydration, but it doesn't have all the chemicals and all the ingredients you don't want, which you'll find out in quote unquote sports drinks, recovery drinks. You don't need them. You can use just plain water, and then you can use chocolate milk. And in the end, the chocolate milk is going to be a lot less expensive than something or other aid, whatever it is that you're using. Now, before let's see, as we get a little closer, I want to make sure that I'm not going to get, I don't think I'm going to get to all of the things that I've set aside for the news. But one of the things I subscribe to is the USDA Food Safety Inspection Service, and they do recall announcements. For example, there was a recall earlier this year for a public health alert for ready-to-eat meat snack products, right? Why meat snack products? Because apparently there was chocolate wafers in this meat snack product, and the chocolate wafers were recalled doing an undeclared allergen. So I'm going to put a link to this page. I've got the search on chocolate. I don't know that that will survive the link copy, but this is a place you can go on a regular basis and find, do I need to worry about any recalls? So I will put that into the resources for today. Just another thing I'm thinking fun. I can't find the recipe for this. It's paywalled at the New York Times, although you could subscribe to the New York Times, or you could go and buy the book, which is really interesting. But there's an adobo. So this is a Philippine adobo chocolate chip recipe, which, based on what I've been able to see of the ingredients and videos that people have been making of it, just looks really remarkably like a great fusion crossover approach to a chocolate chip cookie. So if you're in an area where there are a lot of Asian customers and you're doing a bakery, an adobo chocolate chip cookie sounds like a really, really good idea. I'll put the link to this page. You can go follow the links to the recipes and all that kind of stuff if you want to. I believe that one place where the one chocolate chip that will not be used is the Ruby chocolate chip. So the week before, was Snacks and Sweets Expo in Chicago. So lots of people went there to showcase their new products and new innovations. And Barry Callebaut so now has Ruby baking chips. This has taken quite a while to get to the market because anybody who bought Ruby very early on knew that if you baked it, it turned gray. It was just really had a problem when it oxidized at high temperature. It would just change its color and it became just an unappetizing mess. So they've been able to figure out how to fiddle with the formula somehow to create a chip, which when you bake it remains pink, which is interesting. If you're interested in that, again, uh, just I have mixed feelings about Barry Callebaut as a company. And they're also introducing into the American marketplace at least two distributors and big manufacturers, second generation chocolate. So those of you who follow me know that I was in Venice last October for the global launch of second generation chocolate. It's really all about how do we take the ideas that are central to craft chocolate and figure out, so how do we make a 3 ingredient, so just cocoa bean sugar and cocoa butter at industrial scale? How do we do that at industrial scale? Or a 4 ingredient milk chocolate at industrial scale? How do you do that? You start back on the farm and you use good beans and you ferment them properly. And if you don't start back on the farm and you don't ferment them properly, you're going to have to do things in the factory, right, which are going to cover up the defects. So that's what second generation chocolate means to everyone here. In case anybody asks about it, it's really about craft chocolate on an industrial scale, but with the intent that differentiates craft chocolate from industrial chocolate. So what is a craft chocolate maker and how are they different from an industrial chocolate maker? An industrial chocolate maker starts off with the end goal in mind, and they're going to modify the process, the ingredients, and everything else to make sure that at the end, they reach the same result every time, every day in, day out, year in, year out. They want it to be the same. Why? Because their customers demand it. I need the same pH. I need the same rheology. I need the same taste because my recipes depend upon the chocolate maker delivering a highly consistent product. The pH changes and I'm using a leavening agent, then it rises differently, right? So an industrial chocolate maker starts off with the end goal in mind. A craft chocolate maker, on the other hand, says, ooh, I've got beans from a new origin. What can I do to bring out some of the flavor potential of these beans? So every different origin, even, I'm working with 3 different beans from Venezuela, and they are very, very different, and they produce very different chocolates. And if you blend them together, the blend is very, very different in many respects from the three the three sources. But with the craft chocolate maker, they don't start off with an end goal in mind. What they do is they're looking at the potential that the beans exist. So the second generation chocolate is about how do we take sort of like the purity of the process, how do we make it as simple as possible, right? In order to do, so how do we create something that doesn't require a lot of processing additives in the line? So how do we do something that doesn't require lecithin when the manufacturing lines are all built around the idea of using lecithin? How do we do that, right? So we start off by, again, picking a variety. In the case of second generation chocolate, in the case of Ruby, it's mostly CCN51, which is a high fat cocoa bean. Yay. I mean, that's good for manufacturing. And then what I have to do is I have to get it. I need to make sure that it is fermented extremely well, consistently, dried extremely well, consistently. And then I've got a bean that doesn't require burning in the roasting process, right? So that's maybe why this is important, but I think it's really interesting, and I wanted to share that if you are interested in these products in the United States, they're all available now. In case for some reason your customers, right, ask about them. Really important. I'm going to end off today with, no, I'm going to end off there. I got a bunch of things. I will save them for the next time, or maybe I'll just throw them into the resources for today's live stream. And you can find all of the information about the resources from today's live stream, on this post. Give me a few minutes, give me an hour maybe, to put all the posts and update this. It'll be there. If you are also interested, you can go to the homepage. You can click on this one. It says the Chocolate Life Live calendar and archive. I need to do a little updating. And what you'll do is, here is an archive of all of the 113, now 114 today, episodes of the Chocolate Life Live, right? One of the things for select episodes that I've started to do is I've started to generate summaries. So you can go, oh, here's the key points for this particular live stream. I want to go and this one sounds interesting. I want to go and listen to that one. And with that, again, I want to say thank you very much to everybody who's been here today watching, who will watch this in the future. Thank you again to the sponsor of this program, which are the members of the Chocolate Life. And if you do get an opportunity to, please like, comment, share, and subscribe the video on the Chocolate Wire channel on YouTube. And until the next time, right, remember that if you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong.